how do you want to level up this podcast? Right? How do you want to level it up? I have a podcast myself. It's called Life Changing Challengers, and basically I interview people who have come out of have basically overcome adversity, trauma, injury, obstacles in an uncommon way. Right? In a way that's just not common. For instance, somebody that loses weight. Right. The usual route is, okay, I start to diet, then I go to the gym and I do that. Where I consistently talk about a friend and client of mine who, instead of that route, she decided that she was going to do an Ironman, 5'1", 250 pounds, decides to do an Ironman. What business does she have even thinking about doing that? Well, that was the thing, though. It might have taken her 18 months to do it, to get to that point, but she stood on the beach at 120 pounds in a size small wetsuit, and not only that, but killed it. Did like 11 hours and 30 minutes, which is amazing, So, you know what I mean? That was the thing. So instead of, hey, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to start eating right now, she said, no, she got on the bike, she started swimming. Because of that, she goes, well, how do I fuel my workouts? Well, there's where she learned to diet. And then, okay, well, I need these muscles in order to swim better, to bike better. Okay. So then she ended up going to the gym anyway. But she lost the weight, got fit, had a better mindset on the way to this big, giant challenge, which is what my big message is to people, is to stop thinking so small. Stop putting limiters on yourself. I'm always like, spark your desire, incinerate your limits. You find that big thing, you or me, right? I don't know where you live. I live in a very flat area. So if I sit there and said, I am going to climb Mount Everest, I have no hills here. I have no hills. I'm in Florida. It's flat and it's at sea level. Well, I got to find a way to do it. You know what? If it takes me 3 years to train myself and get to that point where I climb it, so what? Right? And I say, all right, I'm going to do it. And then I find my route there. And if my route says it's going to take me 3 years to get my body, my mind, maybe finances together to get there, so be it, as long as I've got a plan to get myself there and little goals on the way. But these are what we call C goals. A goals. That's that A goal. That's that top one. That's your desire, is the A goal. But let's say in the middle of it, all right, I'm going to go climb Kilimanjaro, at the halfway point to test out my new skills that I've gotten and see how that worked. Okay, that's a big learning process, right? I go to Mount St. Helens, which is a little bit, it's not as high, but it's steeper. Maybe I got to climb that next, to the point where then, okay, now I've learned everything that I can. I've done the research. I know what I need to eat. I know my body's in the right shape. Okay, great. Now let's get to my butt to Nepal and start working my way through the base camps to get up to the summit. But that's the plan. So my job in the real world, where I make most of my money, is I'm a project manager. And that's literally my job, is to go from zero to a product, or a facility, or an application, or a system, and have the system at the other side. So there's all these little tasks we've got to do in order to get to that finished product. And I've got to come up with a critical path for the team to do what they need to do in order to come up with this product at the end. It's the same thing in coaching. It's just finding out, what are the tasks and what are these milestones we need to get to before we finally get to our final destination, that final desire. So it's literally the same. It's almost literally the same thing. So I've got 25 years of experience in project management, and it's literally the same thing. All the same tenets are used. And you know what? And I always thought about it. That could be done with mental health. I never put it out there, but I always thought about it. I'm like, okay, we're at this point here. We want to get to a point where they're happy and they're functional. All right, what are these little milestones in the middle? Maybe one is to confront the trauma, the obstacle, the adversity, to confront it and to realize that it's there and go through the 5 steps. Okay, that's a first step. All right, now it's there, still having issues. So what's the next step? What's the next step? What's the next step? And then what is the route to get you there? Now, I do not know enough about psychology or psychiatrists or anything like that to know whether or not that's actually being done. It's just something I've thought about. But it's the way I coach too, depending on what the goal is.
It goes back to before this initial interview, I saw a clip on Instagram, whereas I'm not quite sure if you're familiar with the podcast by Stephen Bartlett, a CEO for a diary of a CEO. I'm not quite sure podcast. I'm not quite sure if you're familiar with it. Whereas he had a guest, a therapist, where he said that therapy can't fix everything. Sometimes you need to take some action, and it's something that we aren't familiar with. People don't actually look at that and always go to therapy, go to counseling, not realizing that some things we can just change. And speaking about modalities when it comes to mental health, and I'm currently reading a book, Connection. I think it's Connection. I forgot the name of the author, but I'm not reading. I'm listening to an audiobook. Whereas it terms that because I believe that audiobooks are quite easier compared to actual books. As much as I love reading books, but audiobooks, I have found love for them because I can go anywhere, put my headset and listen to the book, where the author speaks about these things around mental health. And I realized that we've been told a lot of things, that depression is caused by this and this and this, and at some point that we actually separate mental health and anxiety, not realizing that most of the time, sometimes you can at the same time have depression and anxiety at the same time, and sometimes we ask ourselves why. And whereas most of the time they are associated, and things like that. I don't want to dive deeply. I think there will be another episode, whereas we get into that. It's quite it's such a conversation. Brad, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate your time. Really enjoyed the conversation. I really loved how you actually looked at it. Some would say that, why would you interview an endurance coach? And at some point during our conversation, one thing that we realized is the fact, as much as we speak about fitness, as much as we speak about in a way of being your path of being riding a marathon, being part of Ironman, running an Ironman, doing an Ironman, realizing that one can actually, what we said, take that into their lives and realize, oh, flip, I need this to actually change my life. I need, just because I'm in this, I can actually change this and this and this and this. Same thing with David Goggins. I'm not a runner. I'm not a marathon runner. But at the same time, I actually find things that are quite important. There are things that I would say that benefit me in a way of my mental well-being when it comes to my life. So thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate your time. Really enjoyed the conversation.
I appreciate it too. Thank you very much for having me.